if there's not a sense of cultural base of education, the alignment's not going to work.
The gift that we have is that it's within us, and we can truly start the healing from the inside out.
To learn, sign me up. I don't care.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 Innovation Award winner, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And since 2020, our team has reached out directly and indirectly to over 400,000 dads, fathers, and male caregivers around the world. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on Sunday, February 23rd. Yes, February is still marching on. Haven't had any crazy amount of snow in Toronto this week, which is fantastic, which is a very good thing that we haven't had any. And nice Sunday. It's somewhat normal temperature. Snow slowly but surely is beginning to melt, but we have had so much over the last 2 weeks. It's going to take a while for it to completely go away. So we're looking forward to well, actually, we're supposed to be getting some colder weather by the end of next week. So we're going to go back into the colder stuff by the end of next week, or end of this week. I guess Sunday starts a new week. I don't know. Is it Sunday? I don't know. Some people take Sunday as a new week. Some people take Monday as a new week. I don't know. But just the upcoming week. Let's just do that. Let's do that. 100%. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back from break, we're going to introduce our good friend, Cesar Ndema-Moussa, who will be giving us always strong takes on Black Canada Talking. So we will be right back in about 30 seconds for you. All right. So here we go.
If the black dollar was not important, they wouldn't be doing these type of commercials to get your business back.
The same people who don't want gun checks, mental health checks, all for open carry. And when your kid gets shot in school, they offer thoughts and prayers. Make it make sense.
Y'all don't understand how our government works.
I think the lesson that we learned from that 4 years is how miserable people are. Their misery is contagious.
All right. So make sure you catch that Saturday afternoons, 2 p.m. Don't say 2 p.m. I'm doing reverse order. 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Aisha K. Staggers and Laura Laki. Prime time Saturday with Aisha and Lala, where they try to make sense of the nonsense that's going on in American politics and culture. I highly recommend you check it out. All right. Let's bring him. Actually, you know what? Why don't I do this? Why don't I do first? Subscribe to the Dr. Vibe show on YouTube and hit the notification button. We finally passed 1,690 subscribers. Yay, finally. I ask, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel as of yet and you're up to it, please do. We'd love you to do that. We'd absolutely love you to do that so we can get to 1,700 subscribers. Also follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. If you want to advertise your business, product, or service on any of the platforms that I hang out on, please feel free to email me dr.vibe at the vibe.com. And also, we are part of the Indie Soup Media team, which is driven by a dear friend, Dr. Tachi, out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They're just going to be starting their new season, I believe, this week while we're broadcasting. And that's about 30 independent content creators. And she drives the ship, and over 22,000 YouTube subscribers in about 9 months of operation. Now, since we've done all the housework, let's bring up our good friend, Cesar Ndema-Moussa. What is going on, Cesar?
Dr. Vibe, hi, thanks for having me always. Brothers and sisters in the lives, thank you.
Good. What's been going on in your world?
Well, you know, Black History Month, lots of presentations, conferences. Tomorrow, I have a university address at the University of Ottawa. In French and English, which will be aired kind of as a podcast where I address some of these issues that we notably we talk about.
Yeah.
Tuesday, I'm addressing racism in healthcare, or basically,
Oh.
yes, racism in healthcare in Canada. So yeah, lots of talk, and of course, being there for the community. Last night, celebrating one of my good friends, Eve, 21st wedding anniversary. So absolutely, absolutely.
Black love, absolutely.
Black love. As I had the honor to give a, a short speech, I reminded our people, all the attendees, families, and friends about how we cannot say Haiti chérie, and we cannot really talk about loving and caring for our Black community without loving and caring the Black family, and
Yes.
the love, the children, and building the household, as so many others also mentioned. It starts at home. So yeah.
Very well, congratulations on achievement. I was at lunch this afternoon with a couple, and we were talking about the importance of the Black family, because all the challenges I feel that, well, most of the challenges, sorry, that go on in the Black environment, we have to look at the foundation of the Black family.
Sense of identity, the sense of, when it comes to Black people, people love talking about resilience, but although there is, of course, historical and social and cultural resilience in terms of being Black, what you get from home is basically the backpack that helps you to survive in whatever happens in society out there.
100%. And guess who's in the building? There she
Hello,
is.
Michelle. Hello, hello.
Michelle, it's good to see you right back, Michelle. Oh, like
Thank you.
when
Thank you.
we whenever we chat, she goes, "When's Cesar coming on next?" She's always asking me when you're coming on. She can put it in her
Thank you.
calendar. Good to see
Thank
you. Good to see you, Michelle. Right back at you. Good to see you. All right. So if you want to get in contact with Cesar, email address president@rootsandculturecanada.com, and the Facebook Cesar Remy Emery. How are things going with Ms. Ketchup Peters?
Challenges, of course, but also successes.
Okay.
We have let me give her the credit here. She has really spearheaded a new segment of the It's a Trap program regarding crime prevention
Wow.
among Black youth, but not just Black youth, all youth in the education, basically school set. So this is something very good. It's hard work, but it's dignified work, and it's transformative work indeed.
Well, I will say for Ketchup, meeting her a few times, it's not for her, it's not hard work, it's heart work.
What's that? What's that?
Heart work. All right, let's get to our first conversation topic. The rise of white supremacy. You mean it's rising? Why would it be rising, Cesar?
Well, you see, that's a very well way to question it, because why rising? Well, white supremacy is there like the air. It's in terms of the structure. Now, first and foremost, white supremacy hasn't always been there. It is a social construction, notably rooted not so much in racism, but in power that translated into racism, as we see in the different institutions such and culture of the state. But why do I say rise of white supremacy? Is because there has been, in terms of the dominant slash majority white population, white supremacy basically means the Nazi or the KKK. It is not average white person out there. However, since the last few years, and I don't want to just put it on Trump, but because America is the number one power in the Western world, and in terms of so-called democracies, what happens in America has a direct impact on the rest of the world, and notably the Western world. And as such, a return to the White House of Donald Trump basically is an indicator of the changing tide from, uh, you know, neoliberal or liberal democracies to more conservative and even far-right governments. Today, as we are speaking on Sunday, February 23rd, in Germany, elections have been held, and it is not just that it's the conservative right CDU, the Christian Democrats, who won the majority, but it's the real story might just be that the second party is the AFD, Alternative for Deutschland, aka Alternative for Germany, which is a far right wing Nazi sympathizing party. Germany, which welcomed, I believe, over 1 million refugees under former Chancellor Angela Merkel, but also Germany, which, for those who remember, in the last few weeks, a certain Elon Musk not only went to give support to the far right wing party, but even told Germans that they basically should do away with the uh, historical uh, guilt feeling over World War II, and especially the Shoah, the Holocaust of Jewish people. The rise that I'm talking about here is that we are seeing it with more emboldened, with more openly outright racist behavior, racist language, and ultimately, of course, kind of a politics and policies that can truly be said to bring the resurgence of an fascist state, an anti-democratic state, a state that rejects minorities' rights. Do not get me wrong. Democracy being the will of the majority does not negate the protection of minorities. But here we are having a notion of white lash, aka white backlash, versus social progress of the last decade, and notably against certain particular minorities, such as blacks and women, but also LGBTQ and migrants, because these are more visible targets. The rich capitalists whose decisions impact entire families is far less the victim. As we can see on January 20th, during a Donald Trump assermentation, so many billionaires being present. They didn't feel like they were being threatened. They felt welcome, which interestingly is very similar to what happened about 90 years ago when a certain Hitler came to power, because he was believed to be the savior of Germany from a very liberal slash capitalist lens, thinking they could control him, such as so many like to think about Trump, and realizing that whoever the leader in question is, the ideology of white supremacy, the ideology of the savior of the white race, or as we speak now, 90 years later, the last white hope against the waves of migrants, against the growing African and black population, including interracial relationships, the LGBTQ, gay invasion, as they like to think, anything and everything is like and of course, the aspect of the Western world losing its Christian identity, which, of course, they don't know or they don't want to know, was actually imposed by the sword to the ancestors of white people in Europe. Christianity did not spread in Europe with peace and love, as surely they tell people in the churches. So here we are having this rise as we see today, notably in Germany, something that would have been thought unthinkable. An openly Nazi sympathizing party coming second. They're not likely to rule, to be part of the government, because in Germany, as very often in Europe, it's a matter of coalitions in order to, notably in a federal state, kind of like what we have in Canada, coalitions in order to form the majority, aka the government. But it still says a lot. It says a lot about the shifting mindsets. It says a lot about also the changing demographics, but also truly the changing culture. Let's be honest. If we look at right here in North America, we have young adults whose basically political knowledge and mindset since becoming an adult in the late years of being teenagers has been shaped greatly by a man named Donald Trump. His rhetoric, his image, his behaviors as normalized, something which, even for Republicans of the previous years, would have been thought as unthinkable, impossible. And yet, the normalization from Donald Trump and by extent, white supremacy basically speaks to a white lash that's bringing fascism. And as such, that's why I say we, not just blacks, but especially blacks, we gotta be and stay woke.
I was going to ask, and you had mentioned how much, in your opinion, the rise of white supremacy is due to the current president of the United States?
He's an indicator. If basically you have in the world that we live in, look, let me put it quite bluntly. Europe is not as free as one would like to think it is. The context of Germany truly speaks well to the rest of Europe and then speaks to the relation with America. Basically, Europe lives in fear of a Russian slash Soviet, to use old language, invasion while consuming cheap Chinese goods. And of course, such as Germany, Europe prior to Ukraine, the Ukraine conflict 2 years ago was getting cheaper Russian energy, such as gas. But the protector of Europe was America. American bases in Europe. Can someone show me a French or British base in America? It doesn't exist. So a consequence of World War II being not just the American bases, but also the whole cultural impact, the whole aspect of what we deem as democracy. The largest democracy in the world may be India in terms of population, but the number one democracy in the world is America. So if America can have for president a man with the rhetoric of Trump, the behaviors of Trump, the antics of Trump. I was yesterday in a conversation with other black men in terms of which, as I asked them, and of course we all agreed, we can't imagine a black man becoming president following the revelation of such a thing as the Access Hollywood tapes and the language that he used towards women. We can't even imagine a black man becoming president with the number of wives and children that he's had. That would be so. When you have a man like that, before even looking at the policies, who can become president of the United States, maintain such a rhetoric. So it wasn't kind of like a campaign strategy per se. That is the person. It kind of gives a green light to the rest of the world in terms of behaving. And to be fair to Donald Trump, before him, you had someone such as Viktor Orban of Hungary, who basically was centralizing power around this person. Let's not get it twisted. This is not a matter of hijacking power per se. It is pushing as much depending on the resistance that you get. So even here, we are seeing, notably in our next topic, Trump starting to get some pushback, some resistance just a month into his presidency. So America is pivotal in its influence to the rest of the world, and notably the Western world.
Do you feel the basis of the rise of white supremacy is some non-melanated people feeling like they're losing their country?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's among things I was explaining. So let me put it this way. As I've mentioned before, there are three, generally speaking, analysts and statisticians speak of three critical dates coming. 2035, around 2035, when it is estimated that China could surpass the American economy in the world. Now, it doesn't seem so likely when you look at, I think America's right now economic power or GDP is about 16 trillion to China, $9 trillion. But if you are honest, right now, when America is talking about tariffs, what becomes the inclination of other countries in the world? To diversify their markets and therefore to rely less on America, and thus to open further their arms to China, Chinese good, but also Chinese intellect, and notably in what do you call that, high-end logistics such as intelligence, etc., etc. And you have with China such a thing as the BRICS. It's basically a very multipolar world in which there is a growing confrontation. It's not a hot war in terms of sending rockets, but it is an actual economic, but also cultural war, etc., etc. When we are here talking about what was it again? Chat GPT, and then suddenly we discover Red Note, we discover DeepSeek. Those are indications, of China's the dragon rising. At the same time, we're looking here at a Western world in which, when we look at the very changing demographics in Western societies, I'm not talking about rural areas per se, but even rural areas are becoming more diverse. But when we look at big cities becoming more diverse, we also have to look at the culture. We are looking at a culture where the diversification of demographics also comes with changes of culture. It's becoming harder and harder to be white as in the 1950s. Today, I often enjoy telling people, notably online, white people will put racist comments. I like to remind them that the children, and especially the daughter, because they have an obsession about the daughter, that the children and daughter might very well end up with a non-white man, and the grandchildren not be white at all. It is the change of the world. So do you embrace it? Do you embrace change and progress? It's not to say to accept everything. That's not what I'm saying. Or do you embrace fear, ignorance, and thus become easier to manipulate into hatred? This is basically what's happening, and greatly, greatly, I don't want to, how do you call that, make a blanket statement here, but greatly explains people who are MAGA, and notably people who vote for Trump. A willful ignorance combined with a domination of fear and quite an amount of hate towards what they don't understand, they don't want to understand, and especially that to them is different from them. It's kind of that old, I'm not racist, but.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I always hear this thing that we're losing our country and we got to take it back.
Back from where? Let me give you another example. Was it? No, it wasn't this weekend. I can't remember if it was last weekend or the weekend before. South Africa. Protests of white people, banners saying, make South Africa great again. When was South Africa great? For whom? Great again become, in terms of the past, what past? Apartheid? I mean, when the MAGA people talk about make America great again, they're talking about what? They're not talking about the 1960s. We know that.
No.
They're talking about before the 1960s.
Yeah.
Segregation. In South Africa, apartheid. So you see, it is that revisionist, that glorious past in terms of thinking that one's identity was superior, because that's what it is. It's less about politics, religion, culture, and even the economy. It is about power and dominance.
Yeah.
It is about feeling that, you basically can look down on those other identities that you consider inferior. That's why I laugh when I see Black people supporting Donald Trump or claiming to be MAGA, because literally that's like a Jewish person supporting Hitler. What's wrong with you? What are you missing from the message? What is it that you are not seeing? Oh, because he said he's not racist? Has he apologized for the Central Park Five? Oh, the woman voting for Donald Trump. Do we need to repeat the Access Hollywood and so many other derogatory comments towards women? Oh, wait. Did he commit statutory rape? Oh, but you see, like, you can't make this up.
Just to continue on just a little bit more on this topic, then, in your opinion, is America a foundation of white supremacy?
Absolutely. 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 And I am not saying this, so I can easily see some Americans from the uh, from the conservative slash right saying what I just said must be racist against white people. But oh my gosh, absolutely not. Yes, America is founded in white supremacy, not because AKA, forget the Nazi and the KKK. Absolutely not. America, first and foremost, the Boston Tea Party uh, was a manipulation from the bourgeois of the colony of New England in terms of getting more liberties from the crown of King George III of England. So it wasn't so much like the British royalty was kind of surprised by this revolt that became a revolution because they didn't think it was that bad. Okay. But in getting the independence, America's original sin, 1776, was in terms of stating that all men basically are born free and equal, but keeping the slaves, keeping blacks as slaves. We are here talking about how the Trump administration has so many billionaires, but remember what I said last time. When you look at the Thomas Jefferson, just as the George Washington, so many of them were slave owners. So on one side, all men are created free and equal, and the values of the Bible and so much and so much, and the land of liberty, and the manifest destiny and all that. But we need cheap labor. And even to the shock of many black people, even when you look at Abraham Lincoln, the liberator of the black slaves, the Moses, Abraham Lincoln was absolutely, yes, he was an abolitionist, aka opposing slavery, but he was also a segregationist, aka deeming that blacks were inferior to whites and as such, blacks should be living separate from white people, which technically should not be an issue, but is not a reality in the context of America with centuries of slavery, just as today segregation is no longer a possibility. And when you look further in terms of white supremacy, what are these conservatives doing? They are not trying to notably change societies from, what they call the woke liberals in terms of bringing the truth and changing some policies per se. They're trying to do revisionism. That's why, for example, a few years ago in Texas, they were trying to change the language of slaves to something like free laborers. They're trying to ban books that talk about racism, books that talk about LGBTQ love. This is revisionism in the pure fascist sense of censorship in order to dictate and change the culture. Yes, there can be an argument to say they're doing the opposite of what liberals were doing. But the opposite of what liberals were doing is our fascism. In the Western political landscape, the opposite of what liberals do tend to lead you to fascism in that right-wing conservatism. It is a continuation. Donald Trump is not the worst person to have come to be president. Like literally, you did have American presidents who were slave owners, part of the KKK. But this was also at a different time in which racism was the norm. Racism is still the norm, but it had been pushed into the closet since 1964, JFK to LBJ civil rights movement. But it has been coming back out with force since the election of a certain Donald Trump, aka the MAGA president in 2016, as a rejection of social justice and liberal progress. You know, uh, that's why the language that notably he was using, whether it be from Oath Keepers and all those other um, Proud Boys, to stand down, but be ready to liberate all those January 6th rioters, even to the shock of many Republicans, including politicians. stand down, but be ready. Kind of like his own personal brown
Militia.
shirt.
There's militia. There's no militia. Yeah.
Of course, that's what it is. That's what it is. This summer is bound to be a hot summer. The question is, how hot will it be?
True.
How hot will it be?
True. We will just do a reset here. We're Black Canada Talking. We're broadcasting live on Sunday, February 23rd with Cesar Ndema-Moussa. As always, if you want to get a hold of Cesar, email address, President Roots and Culture Canada, Facebook, Cesar Remy Emery. A few moments ago, he had mentioned about resistance to 47, aka MAGA right wokeism. So let's go into it. Go for it, Cesar.
Very much a continuation of what I was saying. So, and this, I will notably address this in terms of how whites as a whole, but truly conservative whites in this case, have appropriated the notion of being woke that comes from our glorious African American ancestors from a century ago, since the 1920s of Marcus Garvey, in terms of being aware of the wrongs of the government and the injustices that can be spread, notably through policies and culture. So a great thing basically appropriated and turned it into this disgusting thing talking about wokeism when they're actually talking about the far left liberal left, which has nothing to do with Black people. Like literally, they're talking about Bernie Sanders and they're using a term that comes from the Black community. The resistance to Trump, and here we see a month into his current administration, we see the protests against notably Elon Musk and the so-called Doge. But at the same time, we are seeing a growing resistance to Trump, even from the courts, including Republican judges, as they are seeing, and when I say seeing, it's kind of weird because for years now, you had former Trump staffers, high dignitaries, in the civil, just as the military, were clearly warned of a return to Trump would be disastrous to America. And now we are seeing that judges, notably, but more and more people are becoming aware that pretty much what Trump is doing is the destruction of America in terms of from within. The trust in institutions, which had notably begun a few years ago with his rejection of the election results in 2020, but even in terms of the science behind COVID, in terms of rejecting factual narrative. Donald Trump, some people will say Donald Trump has a difficult relationship with the truth. No, the man lies. The man is a chronic liar for anything and everything, making up numbers and making up claimed facts, which his base swallows happily and goes to repeat. The resistance here in regards to Trump becoming something beyond the whole the mass deportations. The resistance to Trump has to be as well ideological as we must understand, as talking in the previous segment, that it is not Trump per se or just MAGA. It is really the steps to fascism in this age. The appointing of a man such as Musk, the richest man in the world, next to Donald Trump, the most powerful man in the world. What could possibly go wrong? The very nature of conflict of interest, when you look at Trump's, how do you call that, financial interest with the US government, and him having a role in what can only be called purging so many public servants and truly departments in the US government. It is a terrible thing, not in the sense of me as a non-American being so offended to it, but it is a terrible thing in the sense that we are witnessing an empire a nation, a state, crashing from within by the very same people who are using a language of saving it, but who are actually pocketing out of it. The vast majority of people who voted for Trump and would assure you that they support and love Elon Musk, they're the ones who are going to pay the consequences. Already there are reports about notably American farmers who are suffering from the lack of, undocumented migrants, aka cheap labor, but also who are about to suffer worse because of all the talks about tariffs coming to them. So, it's a false outrage that they claim, notably when they talk about wokeism, when they themselves are clearly showing, as we talked about before, you look at Trump's nomination, the most incompetent, unqualified people for the position that they're being nominated for. And yet they claim that wokeness is lowering standards at the same time. The hypocrisy is too real. They claim to want to save the white basically America, but truly the vision is for white America, and yet white Americans, for the large part, not to be who voted for them, will be suffering the consequences of Trump.
Let me ask then, will the resistance, I guess it needs to be too, there has to be numbers, but would the resistance have to be led by those who are non-melanated? Who will have what group will have a more effective resistance, the non-melanated or the melanated, or a combination of both?
Look, I didn't see that question coming. But to put it to you in perspective, we need to go 60 years ago. When affirmative action came, it was to uplift Black people. But who benefited? White women. Donald Trump, in both his election wins, 45 in 2016, 47 in 2024, the white woman vote cannot be diminished. Cannot be dismissed out of the equation. Despite all his rhetoric, despite all his language, practices, etc., etc. We cannot surprise ourselves that a majority of white men would vote for someone like Donald Trump, notably in contrast to, say, Kamala Harris or a Hillary Clinton. It is not a surprise per se. But when you have notably the very same people that on one side complain about patriarchy and want freedoms and rights in the name of feminism or women's rights, or simply because they've worked hard to get there, and yet they vote for someone who absolutely doesn't hide his mindset, notably towards women, aka grab them by the, you know what I mean? What kind of dichotomy of gender, identity, and personal interest is that? This is literally voting against your own interests. And I'm not saying voting against your own interests in terms of, well, a woman should vote for a woman because there's a woman on the campaign. That could be simplistic as an analysis. But you should judge someone by what they tell you that they are and what they show you to be. So this resistance, I'm tired of people expecting for Black people to be at the forefront of the fight of social justice. Because far too often, when we talk about group dynamics, I am not talking about individuals. As people hear me, I always greet our sisters and brothers, Black people, but I also greet our allies. People who, without being Black, choose to educate themselves, choose to stand, choose to open the door, choose to create the platform, choose to walk with Black people at the protest. For social justice and progress for Black people is social justice and progress for everyone. So I'm not talking about individual, but in terms of group dynamics, I'm tired of people expecting Black people to be at the forefront of the social justice progress when time and again we get stabbed in the back by people of other group dynamics. You look at, for example, what happened regarding affirmative action in the education sectors, universities. It was Asian students who basically went to backstab black students, and they're the ones who are paying the cost of it. As I was saying, affirmative action and white women, this is arguably the most sexist president that we've had. And this is recorded. This is not Thomas Jefferson or whoever, President Monroe or whatever president from the 18th or 19th century may have said, or it was written. This is recorded. History will look harshly at many of the people who voted for Trump, but also in terms of group dynamics. And as such, the resistance, us Black people, we must be woke. We must always be on alert. We can't hide this. We can't pretend it's not there. Even the white passing Black person ultimately can't hide their Blackness. And I'm thinking here, notably someone like J. Edgar Hoover, who was fighting against Black progress. Today we have the Tim Scott, Senator Tim Scott. And we have people like Kanye West and Candace Owens. And yet, time and again, they will be reminded that they're Black. We must always be woke. But it is also for others, non-Blacks, to do their part in terms of group dynamics in this resistance.
Just to continue on then on this journey, if the individuals who are being affected in a bad way, in your opinion, by 47's way he handles things, what is it going to take for them to start resisting?
They need to be heard. And I'm not saying this in terms of any call to violence or anarchy per se. But let's put it in perspective. So first of all, a little bit of political sciences theory here. There is a concept in terms of why Kansas keeps voting Republicans. Meanwhile, Republicans keep putting on policies that hurt people, aka white people, in Kansas. Because white conservatism and truly white racism is always to convince the average white person that the worst fate for them is not so much to be poor or disenfranchised, but it's to be at the same level or lower than the Black people, the migrants, the Muslim, the LGBTQ, the woman. As a man, a real man, you can't be lower than a woman. That kind of narrative, as if there's something wrong with being a woman, something wrong with being LGBTQ or Black. There isn't. So here, when you are asking this, we have to remember a certain Donald Trump talked about bringing down the price of eggs, bringing down the price of gas. Basically, kind of like a magic wand. Soon as he's elected, boom, on day one, this will happen. On day two, this will happen. Let's not get it twisted. His first month for presidency has felt like 10 years to many people because you never know what's coming next. In his first presidency, we didn't know what he would tweet at 3 in the morning. In his second presidency, we don't know what to expect next. One day we woke up and suddenly Gaza would turn into a Riviera of the Middle East, like, whoa. Now, we don't know what's coming next, but one thing that we know for sure, the price of eggs is not going down. The price of gas is not going down. The average white person who voted, and I clearly say white person because Trump is not that caring about the Black vote. Sure, he welcomes it. Why not? But that's not his base. The average white person who voted for Trump will suffer the success, I didn't say failure, the success of his initiative because truthfully, Trump is not a president of politics out of the care of the average or destitute or disenfranchised American. We know one of the greatest motivation for Trump to have run for presidency is resentment towards a certain Black man named Barack Hussein Obama. This is factual. You know, that white America that never digested a Black president of the United States of America, aka a white Christian nation. So that kind of resentment is still being carried on. Despite the denials and the hypocrisy and notably the deflections of MAGA supporters, including political analysts as we see on TV. There are champions of deflection, denial, and the hypocrisy in terms of, like you see, you ask me straightforward questions, I'm giving you straightforward answers. I'm not claiming to be right on everything. I'm definitely not claiming to know everything, but I'm not deflecting and denying and being a hypocrite about it. So these people will be the first ones to suffer Trump's policies, just as we are seeing more and more people are coming out saying they didn't know he would do this. Meanwhile, the man did say it in his campaign. I love some of these images of people, non-white people, who voted for Trump or who supported Trump, and they're being deported. You voted for the man who literally is now deporting you.
Project 2025, he said he knew nothing about it. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
The gentleman who's in charge of the Office of the Management Budget is one of the people who created that document.
The man is a chronic liar, but people keep being willing to give him a chance. You can't blame him for acting as he does. You gave him a chance to be there.
Yeah. Larry Davis says America's heritage Black population is now concentrating on its own communities. They have 500 years of history in the U.S. This population will be just fine. So do you feel that Black America will be just fine?
Define just fine, because for Larry Davis, there is still a Jewish population in Germany. So define just fine. There had been a Jewish population in Germany for centuries. And then a man like Hitler came. So define just fine. I mean, there are indigenous people still in America, in the Americas, from Canada to Brazil. They've been there for thousands of years, and they've been there for centuries since the white men came in 1492 with Columbus. But define just fine. What is just fine? Just fine is not enough. We don't want to be just fine. Why is it that just fine? Just fine is living in a shack and saying you have a home because there's a roof over your head. I don't want my children to be just fine. I don't want the Black community to be just fine. We have to be thriving. Forget 40 acres and a mule, which was robbed out of Black people. But now we have an administration that's notably renegating on some of the civil rights progresses for Black people. Remember, Dr. I had talked about how you have an administration that's willing and able to repeal Roe versus Wade, something that even Reagan didn't do. Even Reagan didn't do that. And that was Reagan, basically 1973, 1981 Reagan, just 8 years after. But here, 50 years later, you basically have a repeal of Roe versus Wade. What would prevent them from repealing anything else that notably speaks to the progress of Black people? And I gave an example as a joke, but it would have a serious impact on many families, notably Black families, a repeal of Loving versus Virginia in terms of interracial relationships and families. But when you have even a Black Supreme Court judge who is very to the right as Clarence Thomas, whose wife is white, aka Gigi Thomas, don't tell me it wouldn't have an impact on them. So what is just fine? Just fine is not a standard of living. Just fine is not a standard of living in the 21st century of mass information, mass education, and especially of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We should be going to the moon and to Mars. We can't be just fine as if we are in the 50s and 60s.
I'm coming.
There we go.
Did you hear her?
Yeah. Just on cue. Just on cue. Hello. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I
have to finish. Okay. Go with Mama first.
Do you want to finish now, or do you want to do the one more topic?
Let's do the one more topic.
All right, let's see if we can fit this one. But now Larry has another comment saying America's heritage Black population is anchored in all aspects of U.S. history. The African Nova Scotians are anchored in all aspects of Canadian history. The African Nova Scotians are just fine.
No, my brother, this is a very dangerous logic. And again, I must take the Jewish example again. The Jewish community of the 1930s was the most integrated Jewish community. This is a Jewish community that had people such as Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud, and uh, I'm having a memory blank here. But the fact that we can have so much food to sustain 8 billion people, that is thanks to German science, through notably German Jewish scientists working in chemistry. However, we cannot be okay with just the logic of just fine when we know and understand that policies can occur that literally change everything and the realities of people. Like the Black community is overvalued in entertainment, and despite people such as Oprah, Jay-Z, Tyler Perry, Black billionaires in entertainment, we don't truly own the entertainment industry. As consumers, we are more consumerist than we are producers. We don't own the markets. And when it comes to even our sense of identity, I surprised myself. I've been watching and enjoying, I have to be honest, Oprah's production, this Black Pastors family series called Greenleaf. But we live and project ourselves through white slash non-black narratives from our value of self, notably through fake hair, to the religious realm, Jesus Christ and Allah. Believe that we will be just fine is a dangerous mistake when 90 years ago, the Jewish community in Germany had a stronger footing than us. We're talking about a Jewish community that was strongly implemented in academia, not entertainment, in politics. 1936, France had a Jewish president, Léon Blum. 90 years later, France has never had a black president. You're going to tell me that black people in America, because what? Because of the number? 40 million? Basically 14%. The black community in the US is 14%, a percentage that hasn't really grown in the last decades due to the high level of abortion. So whites do get abortion more, white women, numerically, but in terms of proportion, it is black women. Our numbers is not growing statistically. Latinos have become the first minorities due to the higher number of children born. But when you look at entertainment, you look at consumerism, aka economics, and you look at religion, sense of identity of self, we are not on such a strong footing. That originated from Cameroon. Until the 1960s, we were not allowed in this white country called Canada. I'm saying white in terms of leadership, but this is the indigenous people have always been here. How much rights did they have? We have federal elections coming to Canada, and very likely a conservative government coming to power, likely with a minority rule. And we can't deny that even indigenous people are feeling nervous regarding the progress of truth and reconciliation. We cannot talk about being just fine. Just fine is like having your child going to school and telling him or her, as long as you get 51%, you'll be just fine. That's a passing grade. That's not just fine. Meanwhile, we have other communities that are aiming for the 80 and 90 percentile. I would never accept being just fine.
I'm going to make some suggestions. First of all, Mr. Davis has some more comments. I think we should address them. I think we should save the last topic for next time, because by next time, the proposed of that may or may not be in effect. Are you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so Larry says first, America's heritage Black population took the U.S. to the moon. Next up, he says, America's heritage Black population is the most distinct population within the context of the American experience. He says, foreigners truly don't know our history. He says, I respect your opinion, but you truly don't know us. He says, I hear this perspective from foreigners all the time. The Black population in the U.S. is between 50 and 60 million. And he says, Blacks have been undercounted in the United States since 1790. And also he says, Black Americans know their own. Anything you want to respond to any of that?
It would seem to me that, because it seems reading from Larry Davis, that he is an African American. So I will call him my brother. It would seem my brother Larry Davis has espoused the mindset of movement. What do you call that movement again? ADOS, American Descendant of Slavery, just as what is it? Foundational Black Americans, etc., etc. Kind of a Black ethno nationalism in the United States. He's partially right. Partially right, because he is correct in terms of saying that the Black population is undercounted, but he's not denying or dismissing the high rate of notably abortions in the Black community, abortions which occurred not just because of systemic racism, but because of the state of the Black family in terms of not having as strong a community and Black families as were the case decades ago. I don't take it personal at all for him to think, respecting my opinions, but I don't know them. But I'm like, forget Black, how do you call that? Black political studies or African American history courses and etc. Forget even, having a wife who was African American, or even, how do you call, having worked for the Obama election in 2008. My pedigree in terms of caring and having worked for the advancement of the African American population, my Black brothers and sisters, is not here put in question. But why is he relatively right is because I'm not Jewish, I'm not white. What I just said about Jewish people in Germany is factually true. I don't need to be Jewish or white to be correct, just as I don't need to be African American in order to be correct, especially because Larry Davis or Cesar Ndema-Moussa, that white racist cop absolutely won't care that I'm born in a country called Cameroon in Africa. He just see a Black man, period. So when he says foreigners,
well, okay. So just to go back, he says Black Americans know their own history. He forgot that, and he says not true. So Larry, not true to what? But he says I would never tell foreigners who they are.
But nobody's telling Black Americans who they are. You don't need to be Black American. You don't need to be an African American to address issues of power and politics, oppression and domination in the country. Like I literally will be there in less than 2 months at the United Nations addressing Black issues worldwide. And no Brazilian has asked me to be Brazilian to tell them certain truths about Afro-Brazilians. I've met ministers from Brazil who were like, yeah, you're correct on what you're saying. My analysis is correct. Just as in the Middle East, when I was in Egypt, this is kind of a narrow mindset of thinking you need, because like there was an experiment. Okay, perfect example. When he says African Americans know their own history, there was a social experiment in New York City a few years ago by Black community leaders basically getting Black people on the street, asking them who died for them. And they were comparing Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, other Black leaders, and Jesus Christ. Most of the people were choosing Jesus Christ. You're going to tell me that's knowing who they are? When we see the impact of entertainment, notably hip hop, on far too many of our Black people, but when we also see Chris Rock documentary on weaves and wigs, the impact of consumerism and the waste of money, you're going to tell me that's knowing your history? I don't need to be African Americans to talk about this. The same happened in France. The same happened in Great Britain. And so many of African Americans leaders, perfect example, Marcus Garvey, they're not African Americans born. They're not descendants of slavery in the United States, but they are first and foremost Black in a white world and society that see them first and foremost as Black.
All right, we'll stop it there because I know you got to run because the boss has come in once. I don't want her in twice. All right, so that is going to be. Oh, so Larry Davis says you don't know us respectfully, and he also says Dr. Roth, I hope they get Bunch, whose Black America was the founder of the United Nations.
Yes, and
all right, we'll leave it at that. My man Cesar, thank you as always for taking time to hang out with us today. Love the interaction.
Thank you.
And just want to say, as always, if people want to get a hold of Cesar, email address president@rootsandculturecanada.com. Facebook, Cesar Remy Emery. Mr. Davis, you may want to send an email to have a conversation with Cesar. I know he would be fully up for it and treat you respectfully. Also, on the YouTube page, while we were live here on the YouTube page, we had a poll. Do you feel that white supremacy is on the rise? 50% of the respondents said yes. 25 said no. 25 said not sure. So interesting. So as always, Cesar, I want to say to you and your family, especially with the boss of the house, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace. Oh, see, Michelle Baptiste says, excellent, Cesar.
Thank you.
Let me just, there's a few comments here. Okay, I'm not going to put that one. He says, Larry says, thanks. Michelle says, excellent, Cesar. He also says, take care and sure. So maybe he will send an email. You will have a conversation. Actually, I'd love to have both you on this to talk about it.
And it's not just that. Remember something that we learned regarding the Black American experience. Martin Luther King, as Malcolm X, as Maya Angelou, did go to Africa, but at the same time, Africans coming to the United States, absolutely they may not be treated always as African Americans, but as I said, ultimately, when you get pulled over by that racist white cop, who notably has racist and murderous intent, they're not going to ask for your passport. So if us as Black people, champions at dividing ourselves, keep playing the crab in a bucket mentality of dividing ourselves and missing the bigger picture as we were talking about white supremacy. I mean, there's white supremacy in Africa. Donald Trump made an appeal to white South Africans to come to the United States. What more do I need to say? I live in a world, my Pan-Africanism is one in which on the four corners of the world as I've traveled, nobody asked for my passport. I was seen and treated first and foremost as Black. The fact that I either had money or intellectualism or I looked a certain way or I dressed a certain way, the differential treatment that I got was actually just a reminder that I'm still Black first, even though I'm being treated better than. But that better than is an illusion to the fact that I'm Black first. We must not forget that.
Don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace. Always, that if you're not making his money, make history, but you're doing both and make it better. We'll chat soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. All right, before we shut it down, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. Yeah, let's bring those numbers up. And also share it out. Like, if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button, subscribe, get notifications when we're on. Also, follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram to advertise your business, product, or service on any of the platforms that I'm a part of. Please feel free to email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. And you can watch replays of this epic conversation on a number of different platforms. The Dr. Vibe Show, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and the Dr. Vibe Show website, the drvibeshow.com. So as always, this is how we close out. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And always don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace. If you're not making money, make history. Try to do both. And finally, make it better. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith. Walk good. And we'll see you soon on the digital streets.